Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Amma ba'd. The question is asking, when is the earliest time that a person can give zakat al-fitr? Now here we're talking about zakat al-fitr of parting with actual food commodities and not paying a person money so that he is then appointed as an agent. That's what most people do. They put money into the masjid box, or they put money into some kind of charity, and they appoint them as an agent. That can be done at the beginning of Ramadan. As soon as Ramadan begins, the person can give zakat al-fitr financially to appoint an agent. On the condition, we've talked about this recently in our lectures, on the condition that the month has begun. The sabab has to have begun. And this has been mentioned by Abdullah ibn Barr in Tahid and other places as well. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about here. If a person wants to give food, commodities to the poor in his locality, when does the time begin for that? Now here, this is Al-Mughni by Ibn Qudama. It's an explanation of Hanbali fiqh, but also comparative as well. So we're going to look at how he makes it comparative, rahimahullah. He is saying here it is permissible to give it biyom or yomain, meaning a person before a day or 2 days before Eid, he is allowed to give zakat al-fitr. Now there's difference of opinion on this. The Hanafis have said يجوز تعجيلها من أول الحول. They're making qiyas, the Hanafis are making qiyas with normal zakat. If you've got £1,000 in your savings and you've had it for 1 year, you need to give zakat on it. The Hanafis are saying here, if you've got, 9 kilos of rice and you've had it for 1 year, you need to give zakat on it. It is permissible for you to give zakat al-fitr, even if it's not Ramadan. As long as you've had it for 1 full year, you can intend to give zakat al-fitr at any time, up to 1 or 2 years in advance. So it doesn't have to be Ramadan. The Shafi'i have said, يجوز من أول شهر Ramadan. A person can give zakat al-fitr at any time as long as Ramadan has begun, because they have said the sabab has begun, similar to what we just mentioned earlier. But the correct view, as the Shaykh is saying here, and this is the view of many of the contemporaries, Ibn Baz, Uthaymeen, and others from the ulama, they have said it can only be done at the end of Ramadan. And he is saying here, none of these rules are correct because of the fact that it is called zakat al-fitr, because it is connected to the fitr, which is the day of fitr. And the evidence for this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, and I've got an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari here, which is known as Fath al-Bari by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. And we're going to look at the explanation of that hadith. But he's quoting this hadith here in Sahih al-Bukhari, that Ibn Umar, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam farada sadaqat al-fitr min Ramadan. Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has made it obligatory for us to give zakat al-fitr in Ramadan. Okay. But then he says in the remaining hadith, وَكَانُوا يُعْتُونَ قَبْلَ فِطْرِ بِيَوْمٍ أَوْ يَوْمَيْنِ. Here. They, meaning the companions, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, used to give zakat al-fitr by a day or 2 in advance. And then Ibn Qudama says, فَيَكُونُ إِجْمَعًا. I mean, he was very relaxed when it came to ijma'. He quotes ijma' a lot when it's not actually ijma'. But here he is saying here, there's no other understanding from the companions. The companions used to give it a day or 2 in advance before the day of Eid. Now this is the correct opinion, like I've said with the majority, and the dalil supports that, because this is how the companions were. But here, this is the view of the Malikiyya and the Hanabila. But here the Malikiyya and the Hanabila have differed. The Hanabila have said it has to be a day or 2 in advance, whereas the Malikiyya have said it is allowed to be 3 days in advance, up to 3 days. So the Malikiyya have said 3, and the Hanbalis have said 2, meaning the beginning period time for you to give in zakat al-fitr. The Hanbalis have said you have to look as to how many days the month is going to be. If it's going to be 29 days, then you can give it on the 27th, because that's 27th, 28th, 29th. But if it's going to be 30 days, you can give it on the 28th. It begins at the 28th, not the 27th now. How would you know that? You wouldn't know that until the end of the month. So now if you've given it on the 27th, and it turns out to be a 30-day month, then you need to repeat according to the Hanabila. The Malikiyya have said no. As soon as the sun sets on the 27th, so it's the 28th night, the time period for giving zakat al-fitr begins. So they have said the 27th, and they have said the 28th is the earliest period. 27th day, the finish of the 27th day, begin 28th night. These people, the Hanabila, they have said, no, you have to look at the end of the month, and it can only be given a day or 2, maximum 2 days in advance before the end of the month. What's the evidence for the Maliki? This is in Muwatta ibn Malik, on the authority of Malik, who had from Nafi', who had from Ibn Umar. So the chain is definitely sound. Now Ibn Umar used to give up to 2 or 3 days in advance. And here he is saying, Ibn Hajar, that the chain is Hasan. So Ibn Umar, now this is a principle in the Sharia, which has been accepted by some of the scholars, but it's been rejected by others, quite frankly. And the principle is, Rawi adra bima yuryan. So the person who narrates from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, if he's offered an explanation as to what he is narrating from the Prophet ﷺ, then his explanation takes precedence over others. So Ibn Umar is the one who narrated this hadith, that the companions, they used to give a day or two in advance. But he is also the same person who used to give 2 days or up to 3 days in advance. Now, activating this principle, Ibn Umar, he heard it from the Messenger of Allah, he saw the companions giving 2 days, but he himself used to give 3 days, showing now the permissibility of going up to 3 days in advance. And for me, this seems to be the stronger view. But Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he does something which is really amazing here. We've all had this story before. Look at the istinbat, look at the deduction, look at the fiqh and the wisdom and the detail. We've all had the hadith of Abu Hurairah, where he met the shaitan and he taught him Ayatul Kursi, or taught him to say Ayatul Kursi, shall we say. He didn't teach him Ayatul Kursi, he taught him to say Ayatul Kursi. Okay? And the hadith goes like this. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ gave Abu Hurairah a stockpile of food, and he said, look after this food. This is Zakat al-Fitr. So he's got dates, he's got raisins, he's got all these other things. A man who's dressed as a poor man, a faqir, wrapped up so he can't see him properly, comes and he steals something from this stockpile. So Abu Hurairah, he says, what are you doing? This is Zakat al-Fitr. I'm going to take you to the Messenger of Allah. So the poor man says, look, I'm poor anyway, just let me have it. And this is the first day. Let me have it, and I won't return. So Abu Hurairah, he goes to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, watch, he will return. So he does it a second night, and he does it a third night. This is the evidence from Ibn Hajar. 3 nights is permissibility for you to now start on the 27th, which is the 28th night after Salat al-Maghrib, unlike with the view of the Hanabila. And then the man says to Abu Hurairah, let me go. This is the third time. Let me go. I will teach you of something. If you were to say it, you will not be disturbed by any other shayateen if you say it at night time until the morning. Recite Ayatul Kursi before you go to sleep, and you will not be disturbed by any of the shayateen. So Abu Hurairah let him go. He let him take the food that he had. And he went to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and he said, Sadaqa wa huwa kadhub. He spoke the truth, but he's a liar. And he explained to him that this was Iblis, shaitan. So now from here, he is deducing for us that it was 3 nights before Eid. And he didn't blame Abu Hurairah for not giving it correctly, or giving it before its time period. So for me, this seems to be the stronger opinion. The Malikiyah have said, as soon as the sun sets on the 27th, so 28th, 29th, 30th, these are 3 days. Whereas the Hanabila have said, you have to look. If it is 29 days, then it can be given on the 27th. But if it is 30-day month, then the earliest period can be the 28th. Hopefully this answers the question. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us zakat in ourselves and in our wealth and in our children and everything that He gives to us. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد.